Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh. We are privileged, with the help of Hashem this evening, to study the Haftarah of this coming Shabbat. And since this is the Shabbat right before the holiday of Pesach, we read a special Haftarah reading. It is called Shabbat Hagadol this week. And we read a special reading in the books of the prophets. From the books of the prophets, we read from the book of Malachi, from the book of Malachi, a special reading of the Nevi'im, a special reading of the books of the prophets in honor of this great Shabbat. It's not that common that we only read a special reading of the Nevi'im without reading a special reading of the Chumash. Generally speaking, whenever we have a special Haftarah reading, we also have some additional reading in the Torah. This particular Shabbat, Shabbat Hagadol, we read the regular Parashat HaShavua, the regular weekly portion, but we do have a special reading of the section of Malachi, as I hope to study together. If you're interested, the Haftarah of Shabbat Hagadol, as we begin our second Haftarah series of the readings of the Haftarot. We've been, thank God, studying the second Haftarah series from the book of Breshit. And this evening, this is the second time we're studying the Haftarah of Shabbat Hagadol, as we did last year also. It's taken from the third and final chapter of the book of Malachi. I would like to focus on the first sentence of the Haftarah. Chapter 3, verse 4 of Malachi. Perek Gimel, Pasuk Dalid of Sefer Malachi. Now this sentence, which is the opening sentence of our Haftarah, is known to many of us, not necessarily through our study of Malachi, but is known because in many, many communities, this is one of the many sentences that are found in the liturgical order, the daily liturgical order of most communities. The opening sentence of the Haftarah is recited in most communities as the concluding sentence of the Amidah. In fact, it's said more than once a day, it's said 3 times a day. Ve'areva la'Hashem, as we bow away from the Amidah, as we finish the so-called Shmoneh Esrei, we add certain kinds of special requests and special sentences. The last of which is Ve'areva la'Hashem Minhat Yehuda v'Yerushalayim Ki me'olam uchshanim kadmoniyot. So this sentence is rather well known, and I would like to dwell upon the sentence for a few minutes, because Ve'areva la'Hashem, the word Ve'areva, the word arev, which means sweet, which means matok. There's some kind of vision here by Malachi that the day is coming with the help of Hashem. It means immediately now. The offerings of Yehuda and Yerushalayim will be so sweet. The offerings of Judah and Jerusalem will be so pleasing and so sweet to God. Ki me'olam uchshanim kadmoniyot. Just as the days gone by, just as the days of old, and just as it was in the previous years, Ki me'olam uchshanim kadmoniyot. With the help of Hashem, the Beit HaMikdash will be restored, the level of the Jewish people will be restored, and the sacrifices will find favor, so to speak, in the eyes of God. Ki me'olam, as it always was in the days of yesteryear, uchshanim kadmoniyot. What's of course intriguing about this sentence is, why does he particularly refer to the Minchat Yehuda v'Yerushalayim? Why Minchat Yehuda v'Yerushalayim? There are many, many offerings. It's interesting that we generally read this Haftarah as we're reading the beginning of the book of Vayikra. For instance, in the Torah readings of Parashat Vayikra, Parashat Tzav, we read about these kinds of offerings. The students of the book of Leviticus remember that the sacrifice of Mincha is qualitatively different than almost all the other sacrifices, because Mincha is a flour offering, whereas most of the sacrifices seem to have been of animals or of birds. So why is it, the commentaries discuss, why is it that when Malachi is speaking about a vision of the futuristic level of connection of the Jewish people to God and God to the Jewish people, why of all of the sacrifices, Minchat Yehuda B'Yerushalayim, and the Mincha of Judah and Jerusalem will be so sweet? What about all the other sacrifices? Why Mincha? Now you could say, well, Mincha doesn't necessarily mean technically Mincha, what we call in the book of Vayikra, Mincha, the flour. Maybe Mincha means the offerings. I even saw in several translations. They don't translate flour offering. They translate Mincha means a gift, right? Mincha means remember the encounter between Jacob and Esau. Kachna et minchati. My offer, my gift. Mincha can be any kind of gift. So maybe it's a general term for all of the offerings, and maybe it's a general statement that all of the offerings of the Jewish people will find favor in the eyes of God. But if you read it with great scrutiny, it would seem that we're talking specifically about a mincha, not a general statement about offerings. So why mincha? Now, you could say that mincha seemingly represents the sacrifice that was most often offered by the poorest of the poor. A mincha was generally the offering of the destitute individual who could not afford any kind of living creature, a sacrifice from any kind of pigeon or dove or lamb they could not afford the price of some kind of bakar, of some kind of levels of expensive oxen. That was not within their financial means, and the only thing they could afford was a little flour. It could be that this is a reference to the fact that maybe God loves especially the offering of the poor. So maybe here comes this person. I don't want to minimize the greatness of the people who bring the par and the aisle and the keves, the outstanding offering. And this person who has not yet been blessed to have the means to purchase that, they bring a small offering of flour, the least expensive of all the offerings. And maybe there are some people who ridicule the level of the minha, and maybe the pasuk is adding levels of strength, adding levels of dignity and encouragement to the poor. You know what's going to happen on that great day? Of all of the sacrifices, God is going to show a special level of connection, a special level of recognition of Minchat Yehuda B'Yerushalayim, of the great offering of the poor people. As the Mishnah teaches at the very end of the tractate dealing with Minha, the tractate is called Menachot. The concluding Mishnah in the tractate Menachot speaks about the fact that God uses in the Torah the identical words to describe God's, so to speak, satisfied level of acceptance of the sacrifices. I'll read the Mishnah. Those people interested in this parak Yud Gimel, Mishnah Yud Aleph of Masechet Menachot. Ne'emar ba'olat ha'behema ishay reach nichoah, u'ba'olat ha'of ishay reach nichoah, u'va'mincha ishay reach nichoah. The identical terms are used by the most expensive of offerings and the least expensive of offerings. Lilamed she'haram arbeh ve'haram ham'it u'vilvad she'yichavein et dato l'shamayim. God is not measuring how much money you paid on the sacrifice. It depends on your intention. And sometimes you can give a minha offering that could far supersede go beyond the levels of the most expensive of offerings. And that could be one of the reasons why Malachi specifically discusses the sacrifice of the minha. Interestingly enough, this Haftarah is read, as I mentioned before, on the Shabbat before we all are eating on this coming week. We all eat the matzah bread, which is called lechem oni, the bread of the poor, the bread of affliction. So in a certain sense, we're all eating mincha. One of the ways of looking at matzah is a universalistic Jewish consumption of minachot. Generally, the mincha was offered only in the temple. Generally, the mincha was only consumed by the Kohanim priests. In a certain sense, the entire nation is elevated. Atem tiyuli mamlechet Kohanim. At least once a year, in a certain sense. Of course, not in the technical sense of the mincha of the temple, but in a certain sense. In a certain sense, we're all eating this mincha, barval Hashem. Interestingly enough, the Haftarah is read right before the consumption of the matzah bread, which is kol ha-menachot, the Mishnah teaches. Kol ha-menachot, basically, with very few exceptions, the sacrifices of the temple, of flour offerings, were all kasher lePesach, the entire year. All of the menachot are matzah. All year, whenever they're bringing, excuse me, whenever they're bringing the mincha flour offering, they're really bringing matzah offerings, even if it has the word lechem, except for two exceptions: certain breads of the Todah offering, of the Thanksgiving offering, and the sacrifice on the holiday of Shavuot. More or less, all of the menachot is discussed in the tractate that deals with the laws and practices of mincha and tractate menachot. All the sacrifices were menachot. All the sacrifices of menachot were all matzah offerings the entire year. Interesting that some of those sentences are read the week of Pesach. Many people don't see the association between the parashiyot of Vayikra and Tzav and Pesach. They think, well, it happens to be that we're reading about the various offerings, amongst them the offerings of the flour offerings in the Torah section of this week, for instance, and it speaks there about matzot. Not speaking about the matzot of the holiday of Pesach. Not speaking about the matzot of the holiday of matzot. Speaking about the matzot of the sacrifices of the mincha, because there seems to be some kind of level of parallelism between the two. But there is another reading, perhaps, why, of all of the sacrifices, Malachi speaks about how sweet the mincha offering will be. The vegetarians are challenged this coming week with an understanding of how to possibly keep the Torah and at the same time have to consume a little bit of meat from the Paschal offering. And when the temple will be built, it's a rule that applies to all Jews and Jewesses that they have to partake in Korban Pesach. It's one of the commandments of the Torah. The only time of the year, I think, where there's an absolute requirement, seemingly. I mean, generally speaking, I'm not talking about cases where, God forbid, a person won't feel well. Generally speaking, this is the week where everyone is obligated in the time of the temple to partake in the Paschal lamb, partake in the Korban Pesach. How interesting indeed that the very week where we're talking about Korban Pesach, the week that we're talking about everybody eating specifically meat, the prophet that we're reading is speaking about the flour offering. The contrast is very striking in my mind. Rav Kook wrote an entire treatise on vegetarianism in Jewish thought. And there are different schools of thought on the concept of being a vegetarian. We respect the greatness of those people who that's their choice. Rav Kook himself, I believe, was either a strict vegetarian or perhaps with few exceptions on special Shabbat and holidays. He appreciated this concept. There are those who want to say that the highest level in Jewish history was the level of Noach, where according to one tradition, Adam and Chava were not allowed to eat any living creatures, and only Noach, after Noach extended such levels of kindness for the entire year of the flood, it's only at that point that God allowed Noach to eat meat. And therefore, according to one school of thought, well, maybe Adam is the higher level. Is Adam the higher level or is Noach the higher level? If you want to say that Noach is the higher level, that Adam could not reach that level, that Adam couldn't reach the level of Noah. Noah was already on the level where he and Naamah, the family could, his wife and his children, that they're already allowed to eat meat. Is that a higher level than Adam? Or do you say no? The highest level was the initial level, the initial level of Adam. Anybody interested should read Rav Kook's writings on this matter. Henny once said, my wife, Shem should bless her, my wife once said that she thinks that maybe there are so many vegetarians in the world. It's an original thought. I don't know. It's her idea. Thank God we've had many vegetarians in the house over the years. Many times she's cooked vegetarian soups and vegetarian cholents and vegetarian stew. So Henny once said that there are many people who are not yet, many Jews, who are not yet keeping kosher. I'm sure they'll change tonight, but in the past, there are many Jews who don't yet keep kosher, at least openly. They say that they don't, or they pretend that they don't. So maybe God introduced this concept of vegetarian sensitivity. Many, countless numbers of Jews are vegetarian. I'm not saying a vegetarian is keeping kosher. There are problems. I mean, whoever's listening and watching and say, "Oh, Machlis said that vegetarian is the same thing as kosher." I didn't say that, but more or less, I mean, you're not eating prohibited fats. You're not eating prohibited animals. So if you're a very strict vegetarian, you're very careful not to eat any kind of animal derivative, and you're careful that there are no bugs in anything that you're eating because you're and you're a vegan. So you're not eating non-kosher fish. You're not eating non-kosher chicken. You're not eating non-kosher. I'm not saying it's the ideal. And he said maybe this was God's way of helping our brothers and sisters who are not yet there to unknowingly. Yes, you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just because to support that idea, Rav Aaron Feldman, who's now the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Yisrael, he said, Amen. He said at Or Sameach, he said he noticed the people coming into Or Sameach were much more likely to be vegetarians, and his theory was that because they weren't eating treif meat, that helped them to do tshuva and come. That's what he said.
Interesting idea. So the week of Korban Pesach, we're talking about the greatness of Minchat Yehuda Yerushalayim, and I'd just like to share an idea that Rav Kook wrote in his commentary. I have the sefer here, the Olat Re'iyah, his commentary on the prayer book, and he writes this on the sentence that's recited at the end of the Amidah, the sentence of our Haftarah. V'arava la'Hashem Minchat Yehuda Yerushalayim ki me'olam uchshanim kadmoniot mincha offering. The flower offering will be so sweet, like days gone by. And he's seemingly also asking why mincha? And he speaks there, and I recommend this text to anyone who wants to study it. He speaks there about a certain kind of level, a new level of recognition that will come into the world, where in the present world, says Rav Kook, the only way for certain levels of elevation of the animal are through sacrifices of the animals by human beings, because the animals are not yet on certain kinds of levels. But in the world to be, and he quotes from the book of Isaiah, in the book of Yeshayahu, specifically in the 11th chapter, where it speaks about the wolves living together with the lambs. And remember that, and the leopards together with the kids, and the calves, and the lions, and the bears, and the cows. And then it says, Lo yareu v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kodshi. There will be no harm nor destruction on my holy mountain. Let me read the words of Rav Kook quickly. He says, Ba'alei ha'chayim ha'karevim la'mizbeach chal b'hem atzmam ha'tikun al yidei hit'alutam liot zevach la'Hashem. Currently, the way that you elevate them is through the sacrifice to God. Ba'alot la'Hashem damam v'chalbam. Masha'en ken ha'adam, so the human being has an understanding of God, or asher b'libo ha'mevin yaskil b'masei ha'korban v'yitkarev la'Hashem v'atah. So the way that the animal is elevated is through the sacrifice. But in the world that will be, in the world where certain levels of consciousness will even impact upon the animal world, shefa hadat yitpashet afilu b'ba'alei ha'chayim lo yareu v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kodshi ki mala'ah ha'aretz de'at Hashem. The whole world will be filled with some kind of awareness of God, and even the animal world will no longer be in need of this level of elevation only through sacrifices. V'hakrava shetiyeh az shel hamincha mehatzomeach te'arav la'Hashem ki me'olam uchshanim kadmoniyah. May we experience that world. I don't know if the animals that are spoken of in Isaiah 11, with the help of Hashem, we have a class here in Isaiah, we're not up to chapter 11 yet, but in Perek Yudal, there are different approaches of the commentaries as to whether we're talking about animals, real animals, or we're talking about nations or people who act in ways which are similar to the ways that certain attacking animals behave. There was once a great person here in Israel who someone referred to the Nazis as animals, and he said that one of the presidents, maybe it was President Herzog, he said that's a great insult to animals, because an animal that acts the way an animal is supposed to act, that's the instinct of the animal, that a human being should act in such a way. We hope that the entire animal world, however you want to define it, shall be elevated. Arvala Hashem, the flower offering of Judah and Jerusalem, will be the sweetest.
Maybe we're getting there, because when I pray the Korbanot and the Pirkei Zimra on the Marpeset at our Road Yeshiva, facing the Temple Mount, a cat that I call Nicodemus, white with black spots, comes and sometimes sits underneath my seat. I don't feed it. The yeshiva has a rule: you're not supposed to feed any of the cats. So I obey the yeshiva's rule. But the cat comes and just sits under the seat. So, I pray away. Apparently, the cat likes the prayer.
So in the Olam HaMetukan, the perfected world seems to be this world of mincha. And although we speak and we read of the renewal of sacrifices, maybe the ultimate level of sacrifice will be without the blood of any animal, but will ultimately be the blood of mincha, the blood of Arvala Hashem. Thank you so much for listening. Have the sweetest Chag Sameach. Shalom.